everyone, thanks for joining. Today we will cover some of the MLS and if we can get to contract some of the contracts on Zipform. Just overall overview, what you're seeing right now is the RBO, the back office system. And I know it was a little bit confusing when you scroll over here, it only scrolls in this screen. So you might need to just move to the side of the screen.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. So in the back office, I was mentioning the other day that there's links. So you're going to have to scroll down. But sometimes if you're on like a section, it just scrolls inside a section. So just scroll down all the way to the bottom and you can see all the links that I was mentioning, our website. This is the usual Zoom meetings, HubSpot, the MLS, mortgage calculator and commercial mortgage calculators, and then all kind of vendors, right? If I'm not mistaken, you can add your own links here. So if there's anything else you want to add, you can add and it will only be on your screen. Okay, I need a little bit of feedback here and there.
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you for adding Zillow too.
Yeah, no problem. So let's go to the MLS. Let's get started here. Just a little bit of how to navigate around. Right out of the gate, when you log in, you have matrix and you have tax. You can always reach the tax from the matrix just by clicking tax, real list tax. Okay, now this screen, by the way, might look different for you guys because it's fully customizable. Look, if I want to move it down, I can move it down. So you can play with the main screen as much as you want. Okay, so the core things that I wanted to show is we're going to do some searches. We're going to save some searches, but right out of the gate in your main screen, you will have hot sheets and you'll have market watch. These are two very important tools for every agent. And I like the market watch, right? So you can set your timing. Let's say in the last 7 days, show me what happened in commercial sales, right? And then I can pick new listings back on the market, price decrease, price increase, how many went under contract, how many closed, right? So right out of the gate, you get a lot of information in this graph. And then you say, okay, show me everything that got back on the market in the last 7 days. And these are the things that were under contract and came back. But over here, you'll have all those selections again. So I can switch to residential in the last 24 hours, right? 300 new listings. What does that do? That really helps me kind of figure out what's going on in the market. If you look at those numbers every day, then you'll know that, okay, 300, 300, 300, 300. Wait a second, 600 houses went on the market. What happened? Right? If the last 2 weeks, 2 months I've been watching, it was anywhere between 200 and 400, and all of a sudden we have 600 or 800 going on the market, something is going on. Or the other way around, if it's between 200 and 400 and all of a sudden there's like 40, something's going on, right? Now there's always seasonality and everything, but it also helps you see the ratio. For example, 324 new listings, but 621 went under contract, right? That means, and 517 pending, 416 closed. That means we are really moving slower on inventory. We're in our inventory is dying basically. Right, 2,500 added in the last week, but 1,600 went under contract, and 3,000 are pending, and another 2,500 closed. Right, so we put a lot more under contract and move along the contract to close than we add into the market. That's just our inventory challenges, right? We're all aware of that. So I like using the market watch. It helps me see the numbers. It helps me see statistics, but it also helps me if I'm looking for something specific, like, I don't know, duplexes, right? The numbers are going to be a lot smaller. So I can always say, okay, show me what came back on the market or what decreased in price. If it decreased in price, it probably means it was overpriced. Maybe I saw it and I thought it was overpriced. Maybe it bounced back on the market. Then I can come in, I can drill, and I can go into it. Right? So back to my dashboard. As you can see, I have my favorite searches. You can save up to 10 searches on the home and basically helps you. Okay, I'll do that. I just did it last night, but when I do update, he tells me all the changes that happened to this since the last time I did update. So I can always go to my search and it will show me everything, but I can also just see the delta, the changes that happened since the last time I clicked on the update, right? So if I go to my search, there are 195 properties in that fit that criteria. But if I'm looking at changes, since I did it yesterday, only one property was added since yesterday. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, by the way, if I'm moving too fast on something, let me know. So this is how I handle my homepage. One more cool thing on the homepage that I like to show is recent searches, right? So if you search for a specific MLS earlier and you don't remember what it was, or you went to a different criteria, you want to go back, it's always on your recent searches. It also tells you how many results came back in that search. So that's a cool tool that I like to use. Now let's look at the searches. Some of you guys have a little bit of a different menu here. It really depends on how your account is set up with the MLS. And Liat, I know you had to go and convince them to fix it, and Laura, I know you still need to, but every search has quick and details, and then you have residential income, which is basically multi-units, 2+, land, commercial sale, commercial lease, residential lease. The cross properties are going to be too much, right? I've never used it unless I'm looking for anything in a specific city, right? But for the most part, I never used that one. So let's go to the residential real quick. So in terms of statuses, these are all the statuses you have. It's pretty simple. Active and coming soon is obvious. Active contingents, kick out, and active option, they're all basically saying under contract in the option period. Once you get past your option period, it will be in pending, and then expired or expired, canceled or canceled. Closed is the new word for completed, and sold, hold, and withdrawn are basically the same. I thought they canceled withdrawn. So when I'm searching, so let's keep going. One more thing to notice is they added Louisiana as a state here. I don't know why, but if you don't want to see anything in Louisiana, you can just take it off. So
it keeps coming back though. I keep taking it off and it keeps coming back. How can I take it off completely?
I don't think you can take it off completely. That's just the default. So prices, MLS numbers. MLS number, by the way, you can always just drop over here an MLS number, right? It's 2002, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm sure there's, it's too much. Yeah, you can always just drop an MLS number up here. By the way, let's say you have a list of MLS numbers that are just space. They will still search that way. I can just do this, right? And it will search. Doesn't matter if you have comma delimited, that would also do the search. So really, if you have a list in an Excel file or in a Word document or in a notepad, right, you can just copy paste. It will just put them in there and you can hit the search and give you the whole list. So just a few little things that I like to use over here is on the bottom, you can add additional fields. And that helps you filter based on other stuff that is not in the main search, right? So zip code, counties, cities, school districts are pretty obvious. Do they have a pool, garages, whatever? These are all pretty straightforward. But the ones that are not straightforward are days on the market or CDOMs or dollar per square foot. So for when you work with an investor, right? Usually if it's over $130 per square foot, it's a waste of time, right? And if it's under 100 per square foot, it's either a really big house or a decent opportunity. Look, I'm doing $100 per square foot or less, right? The minus says or less. And then I'm going to zoom in and you'll see that there is really nothing in our immediate area, right? Dallas, Plano, Richardson, nothing, right? That is an auction. So don't get excited that there's a $250,000 house in McKinney. That's a $5 million property. That's probably 15,000 square foot, 58,000 square foot, and so on. So you get the idea, right? The core areas have nothing under $100 per square foot. Why? Because it's Plano, Frisco, McKinney, Allen, and so on and so on. So back to the criteria. So how do you do that? At the bottom of your screen, you'll have add, remove for additional field. And then all you have to do is just pick whichever field you want. These are all the fields that they make you put when you put a listing. This is all the fields, right? So you can pick really any one you want. So based on how you work with your investors, I put the ones that I find interesting for my searches and I add them over here. Let's say I did this search. I want to see all the houses under 100 per square foot, right? I'm going to go to results, and then I can do a few things, right? I can narrow. So let's say out of all those 948, I went to the map and I said, okay, I'm only interested in the houses in North Texas. So that one looks interesting. Let's check the box. And that one looks interesting. Let's check the box. And that one is interesting. I want to check the box. Okay. So now I check the boxes on 3 properties, right? You see I have 3 blue checks. And I'm going back to my results. And there's 1 here, and there's going to be somewhere along the pages. So there's going to be 3 that are checked across. You see, checked 3. So but I don't want to see all those 948 properties. So I can do refine and narrow. Narrow automatically kicks everything out that is not checked. So I found that very helpful, especially when you do a search for a specific client. You check the boxes on a few of them and you go, okay, that's interesting, that's interesting, that's interesting. The rest I don't care. So you can narrow, or you can do discard, which will do the opposite. I can do a quick CMA from this point because I got 3 of them checked already, and it will automatically generate the quick CMA for me. I can print, I can email, I can export, and so on and so on. What I wanted to show you is the save feature. The save feature, let me save it as a new search, and then it's going to ask me, oh, who is it for, right? Or I can do a new automatic email. So let's say I want to send an automatic email to one of my investors with these things. So that, okay, so back with new saved search, he's asking me for name, new one, which contact, right? And then I can click this box because I already have 10 searches on my main page. But if this is one of the searches that you want to put on your main page and you don't have 10 already, you can click here and it will automatically make it one of those 10 that show up on your dashboard over here. Now let's talk about doing a CMA real quick. So let's pick a random property. Just anybody, I don't know, let's do searches. Yes.
I was trying to do some CMA for a property that I wasn't able to find any compatible. Maybe you can do on this one?
Sure, that sounds good. Hit me.
2319.
23?
Yeah, 19.
Yeah.
Promontory Point.
I'm sorry?
Promontory Point.
He's giving you.
Oh, I don't know the MLS number.
Okay, 1 second. What's the street name? What city is it? This
2319 Promontory Point.
Nope. Is that a duplex?
It's a duplex.
Oh, you should have started with that. No, 2319?
Yes.
The name, there is no such thing. You see, I have 0 matches.
So if it was an off market previously, it means that it would never be on the MLS?
No, no. What do you mean off market? Was it on the MLS? Have you ever seen it
Not
on the MLS?
I'm not 100% sure. No, I didn't see it.
No. So
I saw it on Red.
Well, like I said, it's not on the MLS. 2319 is not on the MLS. 0 matches. Has never and hasn't been on the MLS in the last 90 days. Not as a duplex or a multi-unit. Okay, but it doesn't matter, right? So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do all the Plano multi-units, right? There were 4 in the last 90 days, right? I'm gonna go to the map, right? And this is what's going on, right? So do you know where in Plano it is?
Right close to Havana, Plano.
Because that would be over here. Oh, there's no comps in the area in the last 90 days, right? But here's what I'm going to do. Since you know the area, So we're going to do this, right?
It was actually sold in April of last year.
Okay. Again, it's Coit and Parker, right?
Yes, very close by.
Right. So I'm just going to do a little square here around Coit and Parker. Okay. And then I'm going to go back to my criteria and I'm going to say, you know what? Show me 2 years back. There's nothing in the last 2 years that was sold in that area.
Yeah, I wasn't able to find any
Okay.
either.
Because nothing that is a multi-unit was sold in that area. So there's a good chance what you're looking at is 2 half duplexes. So I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it over there in the single family area. Okay. I'm going to go back to my map. I'm going to circle that area that I'm interested in. Coit and Parker.
Well, since it gets complicated, maybe we should choose a different address to work on for now.
No, it doesn't matter.
Training
What I'm
purposes,
showing
and
you
not
right
talking
now
about
is
it.
how I'm doing comps. What I'm doing with comps is instead of looking by and searching by the street address or by the neighborhood, I prefer to use a shape. So let's say it was on the bottom side of Plano and Parker and Coit Road, right? A few critical things to notice is that one, never cross major highways or major streets, right? So I'll never cross Coit, I'll never cross Parker, right? If it was in this area, this is all I'm gonna go to. Now, the other thing is when you zoom a little bit out, you will see that the Google gives you the name of the neighborhoods, Riverbend, High Place, Lancaster Estates, Huntington Park, right? So you can tell when things are going to be moving off to a different neighborhood. So I'm trying to skip moving off to a different neighborhood. So once I recognize that this is my area and this is where I want to look at, then here's my comps. I can go back to results. And these are going to be my comps. I can always filter, you know, let's see, 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 4 bedrooms. So if the property I'm looking at is a 4 bedrooms, I can immediately just say, okay, just show me the 4 bedrooms. And now I'm down to 3. So back to where we were on the comps, but I always prefer using a shape over a neighborhood name because sometimes agent misspell the neighborhood's name. Sometimes they have like phase 1, phase 2, and so on. When I do a shape, I can really, you know, pick exactly where I want to go and not fall into a trap of including things that shouldn't be included. Does that make sense? Any other questions you guys might have had on the MLS and how to use it? I know that was very high level, but really the best thing about the MLS is to get your hands on and start playing with it and understanding what every filter does. I'll take that as a no. Okay, so one more thing to look at is the tax system. Let's just pick a random MLS number. Okay. So before the tax, a couple of things to notice on the MLS is that a lot of the tax information is right here. You don't have to go anywhere. I just clicked on the tax tab and I can see it. I can see the owner name. I can see the appraised value in the last 3 years. I can see the percent change, right? 2020 went down 3%, 2021 went up 1%, and so on. In certain properties, I'll also see the last transactions and the last mortgage that was taken. It really depends if they have that information or not. I also have, and another important thing is Parcel Map. This is sometimes critical to realize that because we were looking at a duplex the other day with Liat, and it had 2 halves that had 2 separate lots. So knowing if your duplex or multi-unit property is on 1 plat or multiple plats is super critical and easy to understand from the maps. Flood maps, also very important, especially when you work with investors, because they don't usually calculate floods, and being in a flood zone requires a flood insurance. So if you're in the orange, you're good. If there's anything blue or purple, not so good. So pay attention to it. That specific property is not on the flood map, but this property is, right? So if you were on this property, you would have a piece of it in the flood zone. If I zoom out, you'll see there's multiple flood zones all over the place. Okay. Any other questions about MLS? So I can always go to the tax system, or from here, I can just click on the link that says Open Realist. So when you're in the system, right, you can either go from here and say Realist Tax, right? Or you can go the other way, or you can go from the original screen and click Tax. They're all going to get you to this screen. So you can always look for, let's see, 2810 Mayfield Road, right? Because I did that search the other day. And it will give you all the information you need on that property. But let's say you just give an address because you want that property next door. All you have to do is go back, and you will be already on that property that you were searching. So now you can click on the one next door or the one next door, and to get information about those properties. Okay, so that's a tax system. Let me look at my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. Searches, hot sheets, homepage. Yep, that looks good. So now we can go to Zipforms, unless anybody has any questions about the MLS.
No.
Okay. So Texas Realtors, that's how we get to the zip form. At least that's how I get to the zip form. Okay. One of the most important things that I want you to learn about the zip forms is the use of templates. Templates make your life easy. If they don't make your life easy, then what's the point in working this? I don't want to come in and do every single time, do the same thing over and over and over. So I can create a template. So when it comes to my transactions, I'm just going to do a fake transaction real quick. Let's say I want to put a purchase order for one of my clients. Sorry about that. 123 Fake Street. It's a residential. I'm going to put an offer. And I'm going to use one of my clients as the template. And I'm going to hit save. Before I'm going to hit save, here's a little trick that I like to do is add image, right? So I can add, I'm sorry, an image to that transaction. And if you can see in the background, my transactions, they will have pictures of the property. Right, I just go to the MLS, I take that picture, I do right-click save, I save it somewhere on my computer so I can use it later. Let's stick it here. 123 Fake House, and then here I can just add 123 Fake House. There's the property. It doesn't sound very important for you right now, but trust me, once you'll have more than 1 or 2 transactions going on, it's good to know which one you're working on. So it works on it, it creates it, and then it applies the template. So the templates will have everything you have in it, right? So for example, it will have the parties that I saved in it. In that case, my buyer, right? It will have the documents. So what documents do I have? I always add 1, 2, 3, 4 to my transact template. And then, so this is my generic template for a buyer, right? I don't usually work with buyers, but this one I started working with a long time ago. So I stuck with them, but basically I have the contract, I have third-party financing, I have lead-based paint with the pamphlet. I have residential leases because he's an investor and we always buy stuff that potentially have leases. IABS, you should always have IABS, wire fraud warning, and consumer protection. And then let's say this property that we're buying is 1999 built. So I don't need the lead based. All I have to do is after I apply the template is just delete. And that's it. Once I deleted it, it's no longer in the transaction. Everybody's happy. It's a lot easier for me to put all those in the template and then delete what I don't need instead of going to, okay, I need lead-based. Let's go to the forms and let's search for lead-based paint and start finding whatever I need to. Does that make sense?
What is the white fraud warning?
The what? I'm sorry?
The white fraud warning?
Yes. So wire fraud warning, there is a buyer version and there's a seller version. So make sure that you get the right one. But it basically says if somebody gives you wire instruction, make a phone call and verify that the wire instructions are correct. because in the last few years, there were multiple situations where hackers took over somebody's email. And if they're in your email and they see that the title company sent you wire instructions, what they did is they intercepted the email, changed the wire instructions, and then dropped it in the inbox. So you open your mail in the morning, you see wire instruction from the company saying, send this to this bank account. You wouldn't suspect it. It's in your inbox, right? And then the problem with wires is once that money is going out of your account, it's gone. It's not like a credit card. It's not protected. There's no insurance. Once it's gone, it's gone. Right? So that's what the wire fraud warning is to let your clients know what the risks are with wires and how to mitigate that. The fact that we will never ask for electronic communication, blah, blah, blah. I tell my clients, you get instructions, you pick up the phone and you ask for verification. Oops. Sorry about that. And those of you that have gotten CDAs from me before, and the bottom of the CDA has our wire instruction, it also clearly says, please call Joseph to verify the numbers. And the title companies always call me to verify the numbers. So that was the wire fraud. The consumer protection is also a standard form that you are required to give your clients at least once in a transaction. So that's the thing, right? So once when I do the first sign in, I send them all those things, right? But let's say we need to adjust our invoice, adjust our offer, or add an addendum or something like that. In that case, I don't send all of these again. Okay. When you have lead-based paint, you have to add the pamphlet, protect your family pamphlet, whatever. This is a long, multi-page thing. There's no signatures on this thing. It's just an information pamphlet, right? But the reason we have to send it is because in the lead-based paint form, you have to say the tenant or this is the tenant landlord, but there's also buyer, right? You'll say that your buyer has received the pamphlet and you, as the broker, has to sign it as the agent. So pay attention that when you add the addendum for lead-based paint, you have to make sure that you say that your customer received it. Third-party leases, the critical things in this thing is knowing which section your FHA client is using, 203 or 203A or 203B, and so forth. And then the most important section in our third-party financing is section 2A. This is the period of time where your client's earnest money is protected. Once the option period is over, and our option periods are usually between 3, 5, 7 days, right? Once the option period is over, the only thing that protects not the only thing, but the biggest thing that protects the client's money is this. There are other sections like title, objections, and so on, which we'll go over in a minute, but really they have these many days to make sure with their lender that they can get the loan. And you need a checkpoint before the end of the 21 days to talk to your client, not the lender. Your job is to talk to your client. It's their job to talk to the lender. If they want you on the phone call, it's okay. But your responsibility is to talk to your client about how many days have been gone. Do they feel comfortable moving forward? Because after this point, the earnest money is hard or gone or not theirs anymore or at risk, whatever language needed to be used, use it. But the point is, if the buyer does not terminate the contract under this provision, the contract should no longer be subject to buyer obtaining buyer approval. And that is it. That means that the earnest money is hard. Okay, so that's the most important thing over here. Let's add HOA real quick so we can cover that one as well. So if the property you're buying or selling has an HOA, this document is a required document. It's basically what gives your client, your buyer client, access to the HOA documents. Why is it important? Because if there's HOA, there's going to be regulations. If there's going to be regulations, your client needs to be aware of it. Most of the HOAs out there will have regulations saying that you cannot list your property for less than 6 months period, which means if your client is looking to do a short-term rental or Airbnb, this is the number one thing they have to check and verify that it's okay. I would say a phone call to the HOA company will save you the contract and the option fee and the inspection fees and so on, because 97% of the time HOAs will not allow short-term rentals. So that's one thing that's critical. Any other restrictions are critical. For example, some of the HOAs, a lot of them actually have a rule that basically no rentals. It's got to be owner occupied. That's especially common in some of the buildings in downtown Dallas or downtown any city. Some of the HOAs out there have a financial situation or lawsuit situation, or the books are not good and so on. So again, all these things will come out in those documents, which is why it's important to figure out that your client gets them on time. And then fees and deposits for reserves. This is really basically how much your client is going to pay from whatever it's going to cost to get all those documents. Every HOA has its own fee structure, and they're usually charging anywhere between $200 and $500 to give you those documents, or better yet, to give the seller those documents. So I usually put $100 or $200 down here that says, okay, my buyer is going to participate, is going to pay $100, and the seller is going to pay the rest, right? So I'm going to put $100, and seller shall pay the excess. And then the next question is, who's actually paying for it? And then I always say seller shall pay the title company the closing, basically. So the title company now gets permission basically to go and get the documents, knowing that the seller is responsible to pay for them. And then the seller is going to get $100 credit from us, or whatever number you put over here, at closing. Addendum regarding residential leases. This is if the property is leased and there's a tenant, then we want to see the lease contract, right? To make sure that whatever the landlord told us is correct, and to make sure that, they use the normal lease form and so on. So we're looking at this. And now the big one, right? The 124 residential contract. This is the contract used to buy or sell a property. So it's important that you know exactly every piece of it. Sellers, buyers, land, lot, block. These are all pieces of information you get from the tax system, right? So if you go to the tax system, you'll have the seller name and their address. You will have, the property address, and then you need your lot, in this case 19, your block, in this case B, and the legal description, which is here.
Most of the time it's on the MLS listing too.
This is the MLS.
No, I'm talking about the listing not going to the taxes, like on the front page.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, because an agent can override these, I always move to this tab and take it from here.
Okay.
They can't overwrite this.
Okay.
Okay, let's keep going. Exclusions. This is really if the seller has a specific exclusion, right? I want to keep the chandelier in the living room. I want to keep the shelves in the garage. I want to keep anything else, because the rule is if it's a fixture, if it's something that is fixed to the wall or to the building, then it stays. So if it's fixed and they want to keep it, they have to specifically call it out here. Third party, seller financing, loan assumption. The chances that you'll see loan assumptions is very rare these days. And then seller financing, also not so common. So third party would be that is pretty self-explanatory. Residential leases. This is if there is a lease, otherwise you leave it unchecked. Fixture leases. This is when they have solar panel or water softener or whatever it is that is leased, that they don't own it. Then somebody needs to decide if the buyer takes over or if they want the seller to terminate that contract and return the equipment. Natural resources leases, again, rare that you'll ever come across something like that. But if you help your client buy like a ranch and there is a and oil and gas lease on it, right? This would come into play, mineral rights, and so on. Earnest money and option fee are combined. If you're a little bit more experienced agent, then you've seen those as two separate things. And we used to deliver two separate checks, but today it's all one thing, and the buyer sends both earnest money and the option fee together to the title company.
So you also write it combined? You don't separate the option and earnest money anymore?
There's here. So this is your option fee. This is your, I'm sorry, this is your earnest money. This is your option fee.
Oh, okay.
It's in two separate fields, but it used to be two separate sections. And we used to give it in two separate checks. Option fee, option period, we're basically paying this much to get these many days to inspect the property. Some our clients will be super aggressive and will be less than 5 days. I usually don't suggest them to take anything less than 5. 5 is kind of the norm today. We used to be able to get 7 and 10 days, but again, it's a seller's market. So the new norm is about 5. Same thing with the option fee. We used to get away with like $100 option fee. Now, less than $300, $400, $500, they're not even willing to talk to you. So it really depends on the norms in the market you're working in and the cycle. Title policy normally is at the seller expense, but again, in today's market, we've seen buyers take it on themselves to pay for it. This is just a financial thing, no more than that. It's always a title policy that the seller is furnishing for the buyer, but it's about, I don't know, $1,500 that if you want to be more competitive on your contract, this is $1,500 that the seller won't have to pay, which will add to his net. And then whichever title company you're working with, usually the norm is that the seller gets to pick the title company. But I've came across 2 different contracts in the last few months that they let us choose as the buyers, let us choose the title company because they didn't have a strong preference. And then title companies give you a title policy. Sometimes they find shortages or differences between the survey and what actually is in the field or in the titles. So there's going to have to be changes. And if there are changes, they're asking you who's paying for it, buyer or seller. Again, in a buyer's market, I drop everything on the seller. In a seller's market, we take it. If I put seller's expense over here, I usually would put buyer expense over here just to kind of seem fair, even though this would be like $200 and this will be $1,500. But there's no numbers here, so it seems, quote unquote, seems fair. Survey, I always mark this, even if we have the survey or if it was attached to the MLS, I usually put this over here just in case, right? Because they have to also give a T47 form sign, which basically means I'm the seller, this is the survey I have, and I did not make any major changes on the property since then. I'll show you the T47 in a minute. And then again, if somebody needs to order a new survey, order a new survey, who's paying for it, the seller or the buyer? Again, a survey is about $400 or $500. Depends on, work with your client to figure out who's going to pay for that. If they don't have a survey and you're not paying cash, then you will need a new survey. So this 2 and 3 basically decide which, who's going to pay for it, the buyer or the seller. Objections. This is an important, really important clause that a lot of agents just overlook. Whatever comes from the title, right? If there's an issue, a defect, an exemption, an encumbrance, whatever it is, right? You have an opportunity to let your buyer get out of the contract and keep their earnest money. So, for example, if you're worried about a specific activity, let's say short-term rental, right? Then I put it here. There's pros and cons for that. The pros is that it gives your client another layer of protection in case for some weird reason there's a deed restriction, not an HOA restriction, a deed restriction. The only weird example I can think of is like a developer of a golf community that would put it in the deed restrictions instead of in the HOA restrictions, right? So that's another layer of protection. And then there's the number of days. How many days can they do from the moment they get the title commitment and reviewed it. And then basically once, if there's anything to object to, then the seller has a way to fix whatever needs to be fixed, and then it moves on, or the buyer can get out of the contract and you know, get his earnest money back. HOA, always make sure, is it or is it not subject to HOA? This is an important thing. If it is subject, then we need the form we saw a minute ago of mandatory membership. Seller's disclosure notice, if you have it from the MLS, then flag it as it received. If not, I usually give them 3 days after the contract to put it in, so it falls within the timelines of the option period. Sorry. Sometimes seller is not required. These are usually foreclosures, like if the bank owns it, a relocation company owns it, and so on and so on. So it's not a real owner. So some of them are just not required. If they're not required, they will tell you we are exempt from filling seller's disclosure notice. And then acceptance of as is, we always flag it as is, unless you know before you put the contract that you want them to do something. For example, I want them to fix foundation. If the listing says foundation repair is in progress, right? So we're accepting this property, assuming the seller shall complete the repairs for foundations, right? Residential service contract, basically home warranty. Again, in a buyer's market, we used to say, okay, we're gonna give, the seller's gonna give $500 credit for buying a service contract that is taken care of during the closing by the title company. The buyer just says, okay, I want American Home Shield, or I want this, I want that company. And that gets taken care of. In today's market, you put $500 over here, that puts you in a disadvantage because that means $500 less the seller is going to get. So, and then between you and I don't believe in those home warranties because I've had only just bad experience working with them. Broker and seller's agent, right? If you're selling your own property, you have to disclose, or if you're related, or if there's anything else, if the seller agent owns more than 10%, basically if it's related to you, first degree, so you own, or a first degree member, your kids, your parents, your siblings own it, then I will disclose. Closing, you pick a date for the closing. I'm sorry, possession, usually upon closing and funding. Sometimes if the seller needs a lease back, then we need according to a separate form, and there is a form for a short-term lease back from the seller. Special provisions. This is the only place in this form where you can see the form addressing you, the agent. Usually the language is about the seller and the buyer. This is the first place where you actually being addressed in this form. And it says, insert only factual statement and business details applicable. You are prohibited from adding factual statement or business details for which the contract, addendum, lease, or other form has been promulgated by TREC. So I don't want to see you adding language here about residential leases because you have the residential leases form. I don't want to see you put anything here about the HOA documents because you have a form for HOA documents. Basically, the only things you use over here is either factual statement, business details, or, and this is important, a specific language your client requested you to put and he sent it to you in writing. So if the client sends you a line he wants in there in an email, right, you can copy it from the email and put it here, and you better keep that email. This can put you in hot water with TREC, so don't mess with this line item. Next, and we're almost done here. The next section is seller credit. Basically, if you come back and you negotiate it after inspection that the seller will give you $4,000 credit, this is the section where it goes to, or it's in an amendment, right? You can put it up front. Again, in the buyer's market, what we would do is we would put, let's say we wanted to offer $5,000 below asking price, we would give asking price, and then we would put $5,000 over here because it looks better for the seller and it helps the client with the mortgage expenses. Okay, notices. I always put my information here for the notices and not the buyer's information, just because if they want to let anybody know anything, I want them to communicate through us. And so I put the seller's agent information on this side as well. Make sure you flag the addendums that you're using. We hardly ever see attorneys involved in those transactions, but sometimes there's an attorney involved, so you got to put his information. And then signature pages, our information over here, your name is going to be over here, my name is going to be over here in your form, the supervisor, and you should have all the other information like our office address and so on. Note that this is a buyer form, so we represent the buyer and they represent the seller. But if we are intermediary, which means one of our agent is the buyer rep and one of the agent is the listing agent, then we don't do anything on the left side, we do everything on the right side, and we flag us as seller and buyer's intermediary, right? And then we fill the listing broker up here and then the selling agent down here. This is how much percent of the commission the MLS says you're getting. Nothing in this form because that's the title company to fill. And that's it for this form. Again, I'm going to repeat the use of template makes life a lot easier for everybody. So when you have a client that puts offers, multiple offers, then definitely use a template for that specific client, and you'll have all the information pre-populated in all those forms. The other thing that I wanted to show before we wrap up this section is the e-signatures. So when you create a new signing, you can choose which document. Like I said, in the first one, I put everybody, but sometimes I will, if it's a subsequent and so on, then I don't need to get the wire fraud and the consumer protection and so on. When you pick it, you can always change the sequence. I always put the name of the property, 123 Fake Street, and then I do V1, right? Because sometimes there will be V2, V3, V4, and it's important because it generates folders with the same name when it's done with the signatures, right? And then you pick who's going to sign on it. I'm just going to pick myself for a second so we can see the next thing I wanted to show. It's a lot of documents that is loading. Give it a okay. One thing I wanted to show is if you need to add extra signatures or extra initials, for example, let's say we've changed something over here and I want to make sure that my client initials, then I can just drag an initial. I can drag a signature. I can drag a date. I can even add something in writing and tell them what I want them to put in here. So, for example, I want them to put their full name, right? So I can put this here and they will need to put their full name because I can set if it's optional or mandatory. Okay, and then when you're done, you send it, you do next, and it sends it for signatures, and then send an invitation, and everybody's happy for signatures. That's it. That's the Zipforms and the MLS. We're already over the hour mark, so I'm gonna stop here. And if there's any questions, feel free to let me know, call me, and we'll talk about it.